So, Auntie, can you tell me about when the Second World War first broke out?
Well, at that time I was 15 and still at school, and I didn't really understand why people were getting a bit het up about there was going to be a war, because I really didn't know what a war was like. But all the grown-ups were absolutely horror-struck at the idea of the to end all wars. Didn't work, and we were working up all the time towards a war. And the fact that old Chamberlain put the start of the war off for about a year, giving us all time to get prepared for a war, though at 15 I'd no idea what a war was like, you know. And it wasn't till I started to hear the sirens going off when they were practicing it, and that had a slightly sort of blood-chilling effect. But we thought, oh, no, it won't happen, no. But it did, and then so suddenly there we were trying to stick a net over the windows so that if they were shattered, all the bits of window wouldn't fly across the air and, you know, cut your head off kind of thing. So we did all that, and we had no idea then of what was going to happen, because it was very quiet at first. You know, we went about our business, whatever we were doing, like with me going to school and people going to work. But then the year before, we'd had this business of evacuation of evacuees, and I and my grandfather could have been sent up to Southport for the war, and my uncle promised that my mother that if anything should happen to her, he would bring me up as one of his own children, because he'd got 2 girls younger than me. But my grandfather and I thought, no, we don't want to go away from home, and so we didn't. And then after we'd had all the evacuee business, people started coming back, because it didn't seem as if the war was going to develop as a civilian war. But then it all fell apart, and as I say, I was at school, and we used to go into the shelter at school, and supposed to go there and do some work. Didn't amount to very much work, but we did do some. And then when the all clear went, was we all filed out back into school, and went on like that for quite a long time. And then after that, I think I'm right in saying that we were sent home with our schoolwork for the week, because we were about to take our matric. So we got that year to study to pass the exams. So my friend Hilda and I met up every day and worked hard together trying to do our homework. But when it got to Friday afternoon, whether we'd finished or not, we decided we'd go to the pictures, which nobody complained about, and we took all the homework we'd done, which was quite a lot. We took that into school, and then we issued with a fresh lot, and it went on like that. So we studied in a sense on our own at home, and I think the teachers marked what we'd done the previous week, and it went on like that, so that when we got to the exams, we did them, and then after that it was time that we could leave school. But my mother said, no, you don't leave school unless you've got a job. So I went into the commercial classes to learn typing, shorthand, and the horror of horrors, commercial French. I wasn't very good at French anyway. Commercial French was definitely not what I would like. So, first of all, I went after a job as, we used to say, the box office attraction at the theatre, but they didn't want me, understandably. And then there was a chance to get a job as a librarian. But I told my friend Hilda about it, and she said, oh yes, that sounds good, you know, I'd like to apply for that. So she did. And who was the one that got the job? Hilda, not me. But again, as things worked out afterwards, she was called up to work in an office in London then, but I went to work for the gas company, which was quite a lot of it good fun. That was, I would go on my bike there. It was took about 10 minutes, quarter of an hour to cycle to the office, and you just had to be careful with cycling not to get the wheel of your bicycle stuck in the tram lines, because it could throw you off. You had to be careful. And so anyway, I went into the sort of what they called it now, but we're doing all the sort of accounting for people, for residents with their gas supply. And there was always always the difference between the coloured tickets that you did for payment, if they were paying, if you had to pay for having your cooker fixed or whatever, or if you got it free. And the idea was, when we went there, they said one of the girls who'd gone there, she'd spent the evening remembering all the code numbers for the different parts. And so in the evening, my mother and my brother spent their time trying to test me on what I could remember. And I said one thing about cookador, and they said, whatever's a cookador? I said, cooker door. Oh. So they used to tease me about the cookador, but in the nicest possible way. But anyway, then after I'd been there about 6 months, not doing okay, but not really being my scene. So then there was an advertisement for people to become, oh crumbs, I can't remember what it is now, that to do x-rays and things like that. And I thought that because Clifford had worked in the photographic department at the hospital, I thought, well, if I go there, I'll try and keep his job open for him. And but when I got there, instead of going in for the X-ray business, the gentleman who interviewed me, he said, "Well, we've got a vacancy in the accountancy department. That's better money and is really better for you than going for X-ray things." So I said, "Oh, okay," but I really hated it. There was just one man who was the accountant and me, and he didn't introduce me to any of the girls in other departments or other offices or anything like that, and I really hated it. And one day he went out, he was going to play golf, and said to me, "Well, I could draw the lines at the bottom of all the pages, that would keep me busy for the afternoon." So I did. He said the bottom of the pages, so that's what I did. But I also did it not exactly the bottom of the pages, but wherever I thought it was all finished, so it was halfway down. Some of the pages are big ledgers, which he'd kept perfectly up till then. And I said to my mother, "I'm not going back there anymore. I can't stand it." So she said, "Oh dear, right." And as I had a nervous breakdown, I was pretty keyed up. So she said, "Right, well, we'll see what will happen." Then I went to an agency, and they were quite pleased with me because I was reasonably good. And so then I went to the ledger department in Euston Road of Frederick Braby's. They were iron and steel merchants. So that put me in the position of being, I've forgotten what word is now, but sort of retrain. I had to stay at the firm because it was reserved occupation and I couldn't leave. So all during the war I was working in the ledger department on the 3rd floor of this firm in Euston Road. So then, which I quite liked. There were several other girls there, and I don't think I was the best, using the ledger machine. I was not brilliant, but I was quite they tolerated me anyway, and had quite a good time. And we all got used to the idea of you never knew the next day whether your office or your workplace or whatever would be there or flattened to the ground. And sometimes the trolley bus would only go as far as part of the way to work. You had to walk the rest. There was a big cigarette factory, Carreras I think it was called, something like that, and that was kind of flattened to the ground. I think the Nazis reckoned it was a key placed the bomb when the cigarette factory wasn't really. Anyway, went on like that. Various people used to come and go, but the girls were not allowed to. We could not leave, and the men gradually went, and so I worked there all the time, also using an addressograph machine, which meant cutting plates for all the customers, for their names, and had a bit of bother in that most of the firms were London firms, and then they evacuated to other places. So we had the system of being, the customers were either town or country. But as some of the people moved out to the country, we had the option of leaving them under the London address, which you couldn't because you've got to send it to country. So there was always a bit of a bother about which was town and which was country. But one of the other girls was quite proficient at finding out what it was. And I made various friends. One particular friend that I've remained in contact with her all her life and all my life. I think she's about a year or two younger than me. So we used to go down to Wisborough Green, where her aunt lived in the country, for holidays. But while we were down there one time, Jean's flat was bombed, which was very fortunate that Jean and our mum and dad and me, we were all down at Wisborough Green. So we came back. I mean, I was only down there for a week's holiday, I think. But so it was a bit uncanny going back to what used to be a nicely kept flat, to see all the rubble, and in the corner of the dining room, you know, we used to throw the slops from our cups of tea over our shoulders just in the room on a pile of rubble. You think that. But they issued Jean and her family with more coupons to get clothes, because they were, you know, the clothes at home had all been bombed and we were always short of clothing coupons. And I think they gave them some money to buy one or two things that they needed. But by this time, my mother and I we had the shelter in the garden. So every night we went into the shelter, our little sort of metal hut which was sunk into the ground, and got down into the shelter, hopefully before the morning came, and then we'd sleep on sort of, I think either side of the shelter was a sort of bunk, just metal, not a cosy one. But we'd wait for the all clear in the morning. Once you heard that, you got up, went indoors, made your cup of tea from your ration and your milk ration, and got washed and dressed properly, went to work. And then by the time it was time to come home, we'd have to queue up to get on a bus. And at one time in the war, the doodlebugs were just passing over all the time. And whilst we were queuing up to get a bus, you know, you could see them go over. But we always had this theory, if you saw it, it would never get you. So you just looked up at them and think, oh yeah. It wasn't exactly true, but it's what we believed. And we got away with it, we were lucky. But life seemed pretty grim in some ways, but we never showed it. We never sort of really complained. It was always a bit of a joke, and everybody used to help everybody else. And if your family was one that liked cups of tea, you would swap your tea for, and you didn't have sugar in your tea, you'd swap some tea for some sugar with one of your friends, one of your neighbours or mates, and so that you got life wasn't too bad like that. But we did, and because of the rationing, that you only got so much food anyway, and it wasn't always the same amount, but basically you used to get 2 ounces of butter, 4 ounces of marge, and 2 ounces of cooking fat per person per week. And then you'd have points, and with the points in your ration book, which the grocer used to mark off when you bought something, you could choose the points. You might get a tin of fruit, or you might get some sort of biscuits or something like that, but they were all points, so you could only have a certain amount. And then later in the war it became that bread was rationed. So again, although we didn't take sandwiches for our lunch, lots of people who were in the habit of doing sandwiches for the whole family got very short of bread. But we were able to let some of them have some of ours. It was very much share alike, and you did help each other all the time. And not everybody, because there was the black market as well, and most people didn't want to go to the black market for everything, but we couldn't put a hand on heart and say we never went to the black market, because most of us did, because somebody knew somebody who'd got something which was generally unobtainable. So that was okay. Then when we got to the end of the war, there was the war in Europe and the war in Japan must be. And the first one, everybody rejoiced, and it was, everybody made whoopee, sort of so relieved the war in Europe was over. Everybody seemed to forget about all the people out east, including Clifford, and it wasn't until August that the war in the Far East was over. So we couldn't really celebrate until we knew it was over there, and even then it was quite a long wait before they got back, by sea of course. But I think Clifford enjoyed quite a little bit of time then when it was over, when he was out in Penang. But when he came home, he was so skinny, I didn't actually recognise him in the first place. Just to suddenly see him, I thought, that's not my brother, sorted out. Because I'd been up to Liverpool for a football match. So I came home in the morning and I thought, no, that's not right. As soon as he spoke, of course, I knew it was right, but just to see the figure there, so skinny, absolutely. I mean, he wasn't a particularly fat chap anyway, but he was, talk about all bone. You could see all his bones. So by then, when he got home, that was, as far as we were concerned, the war was over, and all of us were not going to think about it again. It was look forward. Don't dwell on the past at all. Put it behind you. And all the men who came back out of the forces, they never talked about their experiences. Never, ever. And some of them have been through some horrific things, but that was behind them. It was always look forward. find, do what you want to do. There's a lot of them who'd gone into the forces at 19 and things like that. They hadn't really got a career, and they hadn't always got a place to go back to. But it was all and the D-Mob outfits, when they came back, they had a certain amount of choice, because they got a Chilby hat and a suit. Most of them took a grey pinstripe suit and an overcoat, which was quite. It was all quite nice, but of course it was a bit like the uniform. You had a little bit of choice, but most of the time you all looked alike. But we all moved on from that. But it wasn't an easy time directly after the war. We had all the excitement of Buckingham Palace and the King and Queen and Princess Elizabeth and all this. But it did take quite a long time to get settled down, and then suddenly the day came when we didn't have to give up coupons for clothing. So my reaction to that was to rush to the local drapers and buy some pyjamas, because you didn't waste coupons on pyjamas, you sort of patched up whatever you'd got. But have a nice, fresh, clean pair of pyjamas, which I had to pay for, but I was able to buy. I thought it was lovely. But, and then life went on, being a bit hard for everybody, people not having homes for all the houses that had been bombed and all that sort of, so we were short of homes. And then we had the prefabs, which I can't remember where they bought them from. I think it was some foreign country. I don't think it was home produced, but I'm not sure. And they set those on bits of grass, you know. If there was a green, they put up a few prefab houses, and they went up very, very quickly, because all they'd got to do was to get the drainage and water and gas and whatever, all that going on that particular plot. And the houses themselves were very nice, and some are still in use today. But mostly they've been, quite a lot of them have been bought up and sort of reclad. But nice homes, and properly plumbed and all the rest of it. And as years went on, people were, if they've lived there for some time, they were allowed to buy the house at a reduced amount. So I don't know really why, with our housing shortage, we haven't got round to the idea of let's make some more homes like that.